So you guys have all heard the term, we gotta load to explode. But I wanna show you what a load in a vertical jump looks like compared to the load in a squat. I think you'll be surprised how different these two things are. So in a vertical jump, let's take a look at what's going on. These are synced up. You notice what happens when I drop down, my feet actually lift off the ground. This shows that I'm going through a relaxation phase. We call it the unweighting phase. As I'm dropping, my muscles are not contracting. So this idea that my quadriceps would be lengthening while producing force is not actually true. Now you're gonna see that that's the case for the squat, but for a vertical jump, I am unweighing. I'm actually producing zero force while I'm dropping. Now, I don't start producing force until I'm already almost at the bottom of my counter movement, right? So we see that I hit my peak braking force right here. So essentially what that means is I'm lengthening, but I'm not producing force here, here, here. And then towards the bottom, I start to put on the brakes. Now in Edge U, you guys have heard us talk about quasi-isometric. It's sort of like an eccentric, it's sort of like an isometric. That's what it's all about in the vertical jump. Now, the other thing I want you guys to pay attention to is how fast this spikes, right? I go from zero force to over 2,500 newtons of force in just a matter of milliseconds, all right? Keep that in mind when we go to look at the squat. Okay, now let's look at a back squat. Let's see this unweighing phase. I'm going down, I'm going down, I'm going down. There's no unweighing phase. I'm producing close to 1,400 newtons of force the entire time on the way down. So this is a traditional eccentric muscle contraction. So my quads, glutes, all the muscles involved in squatting are producing force while lengthening. So this is what we think of when we think of our traditional eccentric. But remember what I showed you in the vertical jump, we do not undergo a traditional eccentric. So to think that this eccentric going nice and slow with a heavy weight is going to transfer over to our ability to load during actual athletic movements, it's just not going to happen. Now let's look at a couple exercises that might have a little more transfer over to jumping and sprinting. And we use exercises like this in the vert code. Now, it's okay to do some long, slow stuff just to get your control, to get your motor control a little bit better, get some time under tension, which could be good for some muscle gains, right? But once we have that, we got to get away from that. And so exercises like this, where I'm doing a rear foot elevated drop catch, watch what happens. I drop into it, look what happened. My feet left the ground. Just like in the vertical jump, I'm producing 0 newtons of force. So I have a true unweighing phase. Now watch how fast this spikes. Spikes up to over 2,000 newtons of force. And this is on one leg. So I'm exposing this one leg to a lot of force. Now that would be spike 1 when my foot initially hit the ground. Spike 2 is here, but it's still around 1,600 newtons of force to that one leg. So when we look at matching peak braking forces and doing it in a matter of a couple milliseconds, this exercise would transfer at a way higher rate than something like a heavy, slow back squat. Okay, now let's look at a rhythm quarter squat. We do a lot of these in the Vert Code Elite. So what I'm doing, I'm on the Jones machine right now. Where I'm starting is 1,400 newtons of force. Watch what happens when I go down and I put on the brakes. Look how sharp this line is. Look at how high this is. So I'm hitting close to 2,200 newtons of force, and I'm doing it in a matter of milliseconds, right? This looks a lot like the braking force on an actual vertical jump. And then I transition into my peak concentric. Concentric's actually a little bit higher than the braking force. And then I go back into it. And so now my feet aren't leaving the floor. I'm up on the toes, and then I just drop back down into it. And you'll notice what happens when I drop back into that second rep, I'm producing 0 newtons of force. So I have a true unweighing phase, 0 newtons of force. How fast can I get up to that peak force? And so a rhythm quarter squat, you can just look at the ground reaction forces and know right away, this is gonna translate at a much higher level. just like our rear foot elevated drop catch. Now again, this doesn't mean that a long, slow eccentric is necessarily bad. There might be some injury reduction benefits. Things like Nordics, where we're actually doing a supramax eccentric, we can actually increase the fascicle length, and that can actually help reduce hamstring strains in sprinting. And so don't think that I'm saying that all slow eccentrics are bad, but just know that we can't spend a lot of time on these slow, heavy eccentrics and think that it's really going to translate over to the court and to the field. We need to really bridge the gap by doing exercises like this. This is where we actually build a little bit more specific strength that's going to translate at a much higher level. Now, if all I did was stuff like this, it still might not translate because skill matters. So I got to practice the skill of jumping. I got to practice the skill of sprinting. So at the end of the day, all of this stuff is just potential, right? Even when the ground reaction forces look the same, they are not exactly the same. And so I got to go practice the skill itself to get this stuff to translate.